Hello, boys and girls. Today I am outside. I'm actually kind of near where my garden is, and I was hoping to dig in the soil a little bit and see if I can find any worms. So I have a trowel, just kind of like a little shovel, and I'm going to dig inside the dirt and see what I come up with. So I hope you'll come along with me. So what I am doing right now is digging a hole. I have my trowel here and I'm digging. Oh, and I found a worm. First dig. So he's right here, and I'm going to carefully pick him up. Oh, this is a pretty big one. So when you pick up a worm, if you're allowed to pick one up, make sure you always check with the grown-up first. But if you're allowed to pick one up, you want to be really gentle with worms. They are squishy, but we don't want to squeeze them. And when I'm looking at this worm, I see he's covered in dirt. He has a lot of little lines along his body. I don't see any feet. I don't see any arms. So I wonder how he moves. Do you have any good ideas? Oh, I can see him moving right now. I wonder if it's kind of like a snake moves. And I see that he looks like he's probably searching. I bet he's probably trying to find more dirt. And I also don't see any eyes on this worm. I see a band right here on it. It's a little bit of a different color. And I think he's probably got a mouth. Very interesting. And he's quite large. Now, when you're done with the worm, if you find one, I'm going to put him back in his hole and I'm going to cover him up because I don't want him to die from being out of the ground for too long. And let's see if I dig another hole, if I can find it. Okay, so I didn't find another worm, and I don't want to dig around too much in the garden. It looks like it's going to rain outside. It's very cloudy. So now what I'm going to do is I found a really good book. Miss Becca let me borrow it, and I think I'm going to look inside the book and see if I can find any good information about the worm that I saw, if it can tell me about what the worm does and how it helps a garden. I know it's really important to keep them inside of gardens, and also if it will tell me about the worm and how it looks and how it gets around. So I will see you back inside for a story. Okay, so I'm back. I'm in the house now, and I found the book, which is called Wiggling Worms at Work. And this is another nonfiction book, which means it tells about real things, but instead of using real photographs, it does have pictures in it. This story is by Wendy Pfeiffer, and it's illustrated by Steve Jenkins, who is one of my favorite illustrators. He does a lot of nonfiction stories, and they're always beautiful. So I'm going to go through this book. I might not read all of the words in it, but I do want to find out a little bit about the worm that I found in my garden. So let's get started. Wiggling Worms at Work. Ooh, this looks just like what I found. Down in the ground under your feet, thousands of worms wiggle around flower bulbs and tunnel under trees. They twist and turn, eating almost anything in their way. These wiggling worms are at work. It's not what it looks like when I'm working. Farmers plow their fields to loosen the soil. Crumbly soil lets the roots of plants spread out and grow. Worms also loosen the soil as they wiggle along. They are called nature's plows. As worms twist and turn, they push aside loose soil. This creates tunnels. Air goes through those tunnels, rainwater trickles down, and roots drink it up. Moist ground helps the plants grow better. So they make little tunnels in the ground, and it helps the water to get down in there. That's really important. We learned that plants need water. Ooh, it's a close-up. Worms tunnel in hard-packed soil by swallowing it. They swallow it? The soil goes in the worm's mouth, slides into the crop, then passes down to the gizzard. So it did have a mouth. I was trying to see it. It was hard to tell, but it looks like the mouth is at the top. And then the dirt goes inside. That's not what I like for breakfast. Worms do not have teeth. Mussels, fine grains of sand, and small stones in the gizzard grind up the soil. Worms digest leaf and plant bits that are found in soil, just like you digest a salad. What's left goes through the worm's body and comes out its tail in the form of pellets, called worm castings. These castings make good plant food. They help fruits and vegetables grow bigger and better. So the dirt has special nutrients in it, like our food has nutrients in it. And what the worm does is give it more food so the plants grow better. That is so interesting. And this is like the worm that I found. You see all the little lines around its body? I found a lot of those on my worm. Sometimes worms crawl above ground. When they tunnel back down into the ground, they pull dead leaves and plants down with them. These plants make the soil better as they rot. Seeds come down too. Some of these seeds send out roots. Seedlings sprout. Worms help new plants to begin. So they go up. I bet you have probably seen a worm that's above the ground, especially after it rains. I always find them on the sidewalks and on the roads. But when they go back down into the ground, sometimes they take things down with them. Whoa. Have you ever seen a worm do this, where it gets all tangled up? I've seen that before. Worms, this is about how they move. This is what I was wondering. Worms can wiggle, twist, turn, and even tie themselves into knots because they have no backbones. We have backbones. If you reach behind you, you can feel it. It helps you to stay up straight. Their soft bodies are made up of rings or segments, which we saw, and these segments act like the coils on a slinky toy. They let a worm bend. A worm has no legs, but 8 bristles under each segment act like little legs. They help a worm move. Strong muscles allow the worm to stretch out its front end. It becomes long and thin. Then the worm fastens its front bristles to the soil, and the back end slinks up, making it short and fat. So when you look really close at a worm, it has little bristles. I've never noticed those before. I'll have to look at a next worm I find. Oops. I think I know what that bird wants for breakfast. A worm knows what's happening nearby, even though it has no eyes, no nose, no ears, and hardly any brain at all. But it can feel the vibrations in the ground, and it can sense a hungry robin. And quickly the worm slips into its burrow. Hiding is the only way it can protect itself from the enemies. Worms also hide from the sun. They must live in damp soil since they breathe air through their skin. In the hot sun, their skin dries up, and they can't breathe. Like Mrs. Howie was saying in the garden, you want to make sure you put them back under the dirt. Sometimes worms crawl to the surface to find food. They select dead and decaying plants to drag back to their burrow. Ooh, dead plants don't sound very yummy to me. These plants contain bacteria that worms eat. Healthy plants do not. Worms pick leaves with pointed ends rather than round ones. No one knows why. Interesting. Worms also eat fungus and mold. They slurp the hair-like strands of mold the same way you might slurp strands of spaghetti. I think I'm kind of glad that I'm not a worm. Oops. I wanted to see, there's another little section in this story, I think, that talks about, this is it, okay. So, when the weather cools, a ring-like cocoon forms near the head of each worm that has mated. Slowly, the worm begins to move backward, and the cocoon inches forward on the worm's body, just as a ring on your finger would move. So, on my worm, I saw that it had this little section. And if you're not sure, if you go back in the video and watch it, you'll see that it had a little chunk of its body that looked different. This is where the eggs are kept when it lays new worms. In a few minutes, the cocoon slips off the worm's head just as a ring would slip off your finger. The end of the cocoon close. Inside the cocoon, the eggs are fertilized. So it comes off eventually, and then the eggs are fertilized. I did not know that about worms. And then eggs hatch, and the tiny little worms help the soil. And in the winter months, the babies grow and become adult worms, and the soil near the surface freezes, so the worms plug up their tunnels and move down to warmer soil. They stay there until spring. They wiggle up, tunneling, twisting, and turning until they're right under your feet again. Vegetables and flowers grow better, trees grow bigger, grass grows greener, because there are thousands of wiggling worms at work. So it really does sound like these worms are super important. I hope you really enjoyed this story, and that when you find worms, instead of squishing them, maybe you help put them back into the dirt so that they can help our plants grow better. Have a really great day. Bye.